Hello, Sarah here from Tenderfoot Village, and in this class I'm going to be teaching you how to make this little Frankie trick-or-treater gnome. So the first thing that we're going to work on are the shoes, and I'm just tracing the pattern onto this 2 millimeter thick craft foam. I'm going to use black everything except for the cardboard. So I'm just going to trace this every piece onto here except for the sole, the rounded shoe looking piece. That piece I will trace onto cardboard. Once I have everything traced, I'm going to go ahead and cut all the pieces out and begin building the shoes. I like to start by applying hot glue to the toe of the shoe, and you're going to see me do that on the sole, so the cardboard piece. And then I take my little rounded foam piece and stick it right into that glue and press it together until it sets. Once the toe is secure, I will work my way around both sides and glue them down. I like to do this at the same time, just kind of working along. I think it helps me keep things even that way. Once I have those side pieces glued down, the shoe kind of looks like a little slipper or a little house shoe in a way. And again, I'm going to do these both at the same time instead of finishing one to completion and then moving on to the second one. I just feel like it helps me keep everything balanced. Now I'm grabbing the kind of rectangular piece and I'm adding dots to the sides where I want the shoestrings to go in and where I want to punch the holes. I'm using one as a guide for the other. And now that they're both marked, I'm going to go ahead and take my large needle and kind of twist it through each of those dots so that it makes a nice little hole for my thread. And now I'm ready to start attaching the back of the shoe to the back of the sole. So I'm just applying some hot glue and lining it up and just kind of get it even and level and get that secure. And once I get that back middle piece done, I can start laying down the sides just like I did the front piece. At this point, I like to trace the shoe onto a piece of 5 millimeter thick craft foam, and I do this now instead of in the beginning because it gives me a more accurate tracing of the actual shoe. Once I get it traced, I'm just going to use my heat gun and kind of activate that foam so that any jagged edges are smoothed down. And now I'm going to apply some hot glue to the bottom of that sole and stick that foam onto that. Once that has set, I'm ready to put on my trim piece. Now that I have my soles on my shoes, I'm ready to attach my trim, and I like to start off by stretching my trim out a little bit. This just allows it to be a little more flexible, I think. And then I'll just start working my way around the bottom of the shoe, and I like to do this by keeping it laid on my table so that I can get a really straight edge. Once I have the trim on both of my shoes, I'm ready to start threading my strings through my shoes. So I like to start at the bottom, and I start on the inside of the shoe. And then I work my way over, so going straight across the other one, going through the front of that one towards the inside, and then I zigzag up to the next one, right above the first one I started, and I just go over again the top. So zigzag kind of behind and across the top. And I do this all the way up, and then once I'm done doing that, I will snip off the excess and glue it to the inside wall of my shoe. Now I'm going to start working on the legs. So for this, I'm taking the medium bendy hair rollers that measure just under 6 inches, and I'm marking them at the 3.5 mark and clipping off the excess. I'll remove the wire out of those and then start cutting my material to wrap the legs. I'm going to measure my material right at 3 inches wide, and then I'm just going to cut to the length of a little excess above my foam hair roller. So right now I'm just going to cut a strip of that 3 inches wide, and then you'll see me measure it down to the size of my little rollers. And I'm going to apply a line of hot glue right up the end just so that I can fold it and then turn it inside or right side out. Now I'm going to go ahead and slide my 6-inch dowels into the roller, and they're 6 inches, and the width measurement or the diameter is about 3/16. And then I'm going to take and cut my piece of pipe insulation to approximately 5 inches. And once I do that, I'm going to grab some matching material to the legs, and I'm using this lime green. I applied a little bit of hot glue down one end, and now I'm just kind of rolling the pipe insulation into the material, and I'll cut it off and apply another strip of hot glue down the other end, and then cut that off. Now I'm adding this 3/4 inch hex nut inside the body, and I like to do this for weight and balance. And I'm cutting little X's into that pipe insulation about halfway across. And now I'll go ahead and insert the legs into those spaces just to see if I like the way that they look, if they're balanced. Now I'm ready to begin making the shorts, and I've got this piece of brown felt, and I've just made sure that it fits the size of my pattern piece. I'm going to put a little bit of hot glue up one side. And you'll see me make a mistake here in a minute. I turned my material right side out and tried it on my body, and then I did not turn it back inside out and started to apply the glue to the material. So I actually end up correcting this a little bit later when I realized that, and applying the glue once I turn it back wrong side out. So right here I'm cutting my slit up the middle, and then I'm cutting my little V at the top, which you can see the example of in the pattern. Once I get that cut, this is where I make the mistake, and I go ahead and add that hot glue, and then when I realize it, I unglue it and then turn it inside out. Now that I have my glue applied correctly, I'm going to go ahead and turn my pants right side out and slide them up onto the body of the gnome. Really quick, right here I realized I did not glue in my legs into the base of the pipe insulation, so I'm going to go ahead and add that hot glue right now and insert those legs. Let them set up for a moment, and then once they are set, I'm going to go ahead and put those pants on. Now I'm going to use this piece of orange felt for the shirt, so I'm just tracing my pattern onto the felt, and then I'll cut it out and start applying it to the gnome. Now I'm going to take the curved part of that material and lay it on the front center of the body and then wrap it around the back. And once I have it where I want it, I'm going to apply some hot glue and then just overlap those pieces and cut off any excess. Now I'm ready to start making the jacket, so I'm going to use the pattern piece and trace it out, and then I'm going to cut on the inside of that line and cut that material out. Then I'm going to take my gnome and I'm going to wrap the material around my gnome and see how it looks. I'm folding these edges down just to kind of test it out. Now I'm going to work on the arm pieces. For the arm pieces, I'm using 2 medium bendy hair rollers, and I'm marking right at 3 inches. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut only the foam off first. Now I'm going to add a little dot of glue to the side with the cap. At this point I want to trim off the excess wire, so I'm just leaving about a ½ inch above the foam. Now I'm ready to wrap the arms, so I'm just going to go ahead and lay them opposite directions on this piece of material, and I'm just applying a strip of hot glue down the side. Next I'm going to take my needle nose pliers and bend a kind of a hook into that wire, that leftover wire that's at the top. And I'm just going to bend it over and make that loop, and then I'm going to do the same for both, and then I will roll my material around my arm and glue it on. Once I've trimmed off my excess material, I'm going to go ahead and cut a strip about a ½ inch wide, and then I'm going to cut this and trim it and make it a little bit cleaner, and then I'm going to use this as the cuff of my sleeve. I want my hands to match the body and nose, so I'm going to use this lime sherbet craft paint and paint my wood balls that I'm going to use for my hands. Now that they're painted and dry, I'm going to go ahead and apply those with a little bit of hot glue to the cap side of the arm. And now I'm ready to wrap that trim piece that I cut for the cuff around each of the arms where the hand meets. Next, it's time to add the jacket. So again, I'm laying the body on the material and bringing it around. And then I'm going to fold those front pieces over, and I'm just going to kind of line things up and see where I want the arms to go. And once I decide, which you can see it's lined up with the leg, I'm marking a little dot on both sides so that I can cut a little slit inside of there and then insert an additional wire. So I removed the wire from another bendy hair roller, and I'll be using that and going through the body of this gnome. And then once I'm through, I will cut off a little bit of the excess and then begin hooking my arms onto the hooks, just kind of making sure everything measures. And you'll see me trim down excess material on one side of the arm. And then once I actually get the arms hooked on, you'll see me trim down the corners of the material to kind of round it off a little bit, just so that everything lays down really well. Now I want to fold down those front pieces to create a collar. So I'm just adding a little bit of hot glue to make sure everything stays in place once I fold it down. So I'm putting a little bit above the arm parts. At this point, I want to go ahead and work on the shoes. So I'm adding some hot glue inside of the shoes, and then I'm going to stick a little hex nut inside and scoot it forward to the front toe of the shoe. This will allow for balance and just strengthening the gnome. And then once I get that one securely in place in both shoes, I'm going to add some more hot glue and stick my next hex nut in there right next to the other one. And once I get that set up, I'm ready to add hot glue into the center and then stand my gnome up inside of there. And here's a quick look at our Frankie so far. Now I'm ready to work on the head, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this 1.9 inch styrofoam ball in half. I only need half for this gnome. I'm applying a little bit of hot glue and going to set it right on top of that pipe insulation. I'm going to let that set up just a little bit, and while I'm doing that, I am going to get my faux fur and cut a 1-inch strip. I've added the exact measurements for you right here. I know it's kind of hard to see on the black fur, but I am cutting on the back side, not the furry side. Now I'm going to cut 2 more small strips of material. Now that I have these pieces cut, I'm going to take my two small pieces and kind of make what kind of looks like a square, but I'm applying hot glue to the front side, so the side with the fur on it, at the very top edge. And I'm just going to do a little bit at a time until I get to the other end. Now I'm going to trim off the excess hot glue hanging out. Now I'm taking the longer strip and I'm going to apply a little bit of hot glue to the center of that strip on the front side, again the fur side. And I'm going to place that piece that I made, the square piece with the strip down the middle, I'm going to place that to the middle of the hot glue. And I'm just going to work my way to both sides, both edges of that one strip. And I'll start turning the corner, and I'm going to cut the corners, round them off a little bit, and then I'm going to apply very slowly, taking my time, I'm going to apply hot glue around the top edge and bringing those edges together. Now I have a little bit of excess material, so I'm going to go ahead and trim that off at the front. So this is where the two first pieces that I made, they ended up being a little bit more material than I needed once I brought my longer strip around. And so I'm trimming that off, and then you will see me add another strip to the front of this. Now this time I'm adding it straight to the front, so I'm adding the hot glue to this piece on the back side of the material, and I'm adding that to the front side of the other material, the rest of the wig. And then I'm going to go on the sides once I turn my wig inside out again, and I'm going to glue those side pieces together. So the glue will be on the first side at the very edge, and I'm just going to pinch those together. And again, I'm making sure that I trim off any excess glue. It'll just make it easier when I turn the wig right side out. Now I'm going to work on the nose, and there's multiple ways you can do this. I'm going to use a polymer clay nose that I already have made. And I'm just going to stick this little toothpick in there, and I'm going to wrap this clay nose with felt. But you can make a felt nose if you'd like, or you can do anything. You can use a wood ball and paint it green, the same color as the hands. It's completely up to you how you do this step. Right now, again, like I said, I'm just wrapping a clay nose that I made with the felt, and I'm just really making sure that it gets on there really securely, and I'm taking my time. And then I'll trim off any excess and then push that material down from the toothpick down into the clay ball, like against it. Okay, now I'm going to cut a little hole in the area where I want to put the toothpick in. So I'm going to insert that, and then I'm going to add hot glue and make sure that it stays in there. And then once I'm done doing that, I'm going to take the wig back off and add hot glue into it and glue it securely on. I also want to take a minute to add some of the finishing details. So I'm going to take the little pocket pieces that are in the pattern, and I am going to add those onto my jacket. This is also a great opportunity to add a little bit of blush to the cheeks. You can just use regular inexpensive blush, powder blush, with a blush brush or a paintbrush, and add it to either side of the nose. All right, the last thing I'd like to do is go ahead and add the little hex nuts for Frankenstein's neck. So I'm trying to put these close to his shoulders because I want them to look like they're actually on the neck, not on the sides of his head. So I'm being mindful of where I'm placing them. I'm going to take my little marker and stick it right inside the hole and touch that felt inside there with it so I know where to place them. I'm going to then cut a little slit with my X-Acto knife into that material, and then I'm going to take a little piece of a toothpick and insert it in that hole and apply some hot glue and stick my hex nut on to those, just to really make sure that my hex nut's not going to go anywhere or fall off later. Once I have everything in place how I like it, that is pretty much it. I'm going to look at my gnome and just make sure I like everything that's going on. I will probably add a little bit more hot glue real quick and secure the jacket, just to get the jacket to really lay on him jacket-like. And that's pretty much it. That is Frank.